All right, and now we welcome in Rob Bolton for his weekly segment. Rob, I'm excited to have you here specifically for this week, the Black Desert Championship. It's been 60 years since the PGA Tour was in Utah. I've never seen this golf course before, so I've got a lot of questions. I hope you have answers. How are we doing today?
Thought you were going to ask me or open up with what was it like at the 1963 Utah Open? Rob, what was the weather like? How did Tommy Jacobs get it done? I'm well, buddy. I'm thinking of you and everyone else at the tour this week. Everybody in Florida. Thanks for fitting this in on a Tuesday. We hope it makes it to the internet, but there are bigger fish to fry this week. In the meantime, we can talk a little Black Desert Championship. I'm happy to. Let's do it.
Yep, doing this on a Tuesday so I can get inland and away from the hurricane in my evacuation order. So getting it in, but golf never stops, and we're in a. It seems like the weather's very much going to cooperate out in Utah. Black Desert Resort is the site of this week's tournament. Just stunning, stunning views. If you haven't had a chance, look up the golf course. I wrote about it on PGAtour.com. We've got a ton of video content up on the site as well, taking you through the Weiskopf design, his last design actually before he passed, that at least he was actively involved in. And so I want to know as you go in, this doesn't happen often. We got it at the Myrtle Beach Classic earlier this
Hmm.
year. We had it last year, last fall. But when we enter a tournament where we have no frame of reference, not even a tournament played 20 years ago or an LPGA event or really anything to look on, as you approach that from a betting standpoint and just as you look to forecast this stuff, like how do you go about doing it when the course is such a big unknown?
Well, for me personally, as you can see from the swag behind me, having been through that area quite a bit, having a sense for what the vistas will be, I had to write about it in the power rankings and probably came pretty close to, probably relatively speaking, gushed a little bit about how beautiful it is in the St. George Ivans area. And I cannot wait to see how it's displayed on HD television this week and on your mobile devices. I look forward to seeing all that video content when I have a moment. As far as to answer the question specifically, it's like the old days of when I was writing every week at Rotor World in 2008, having some experience playing fantasy for a while, of course, but actually analyzing golf courses every week was like this for me. And when you're starting out in something, you give it 1,000%, and then you try to find a nice balance so that you use what you've learned and to pay it forward in a smart way. And eventually you get there. Takes maybe a couple of years, but you get there. And so a week like this reminds me so much of every week like that, even though a lot of the courses, a very high percentage of the courses were turnover from the previous season, the previous years. Not for me though, specifically. So this week, I harken back to those days, and it's just exciting. Number one, it's exciting to see a brand new course. It's the only one, as you said, of the FedEx Cup Fall, the first new one in earnest since Myrtle Beach with the dunes there. We had Cherry Hills for the BMW Championship. We had some experience there, but it is a resort. It's not going to be difficult, especially for PGA Tour players. Fairways are generous. The greens are going to be running about 13 or 12, pardon me, 12 this week, which is pretty standard. They're big greens, so we should have very high percentages in hitting fairways and hitting greens. And it just comes down to how much these guys can really learn how quickly to pour the putts into the holes there at the 18-hole facility. It's been open only all 18 holes for about a year and a half now. So it's just exciting from that standpoint. So we kind of just take it with a grain of salt in terms of expectations. Let's see what they can do. It's a par 71, so 284 would be par over, 72 holes. Probably thinking 262 somewhere in there for a winning target. I think is fair, and that's low. And the weather's going to cooperate, as you had said. So it's a green light special, and it's going to be beautiful.
All right. So with that said, I just want to take us through the top three in your power rankings then, and you can kind of then delve into why, with that unknown on the course, you slotted those guys there. So number one is Erik van Rooyen. Number two is Keith Mitchell. Number three is Lucas Glover. So kind of take me
Hmm.
through what compelled you to order them in that way and have them at the top of the rankings.
Yeah, I'm going to start from the backward though, with Glover at 3. Last week at the Country Club of Jackson, it's a course where we would expect him to play well because he's so sharp from tee to green, and he was last week, and he got off to a hot start, and he finished strong and finished tied for third, and there he is at 3 in the power rankings this week. His skill set will not be rewarded as greatly as it was last week, but as you and I are speaking, 106 of the 132 players at the Sanderson Farms Championship are in play again this week. So that's 81%-ish. That's 4/5. It's crazy. Like, these guys are playing against each other again, and Glover is right there. The fact that he is so strong tee to green benefits him this week in the context that no one knows these greens, and that he's been putting well enough to have contended on a place like the Country Club of Jackson. That should just carry forward into another week. We've seen him. He won back-to-back last year. He can carry it forward. He knows who he is. Confidence is high in a guy like that. Keith Mitchell at number 2, another guy who we think of as one of the best tee to green. Didn't get it done on Sunday. A T3 also. It's the same finish as Glover, a little different way of getting it done, but high confidence remains high. He'll be able to hit it long and have no problem finding it. No doubt there's an edge. There's a chip on his shoulder to finish the job this week. I love the fact that he's committed. Think of Keith Mitchell. You and I, talked about him a little bit last week, and thank you for not bringing up the fact that I had him missing the cut, right? And I own him, so I hedged, and it was a selfish week for me because it didn't pay off for the day job, but I got paid in fantasy because of the T3. That aside, the fact that he's remaining committed and is going to continue to play, a couple more times at least during the FedEx Cup fall. He was just outside the Aon Next 10 last year, and he spoke last week about how badly he wants to play at Pebble, the second signature event of 2025. Look, everybody has their motivations. He accepted defeat pretty much immediately, at least outwardly, on television after finishing T3 in Mississippi. So he's going to have turned the page already by the time he got settled in southern Utah. And then Erik van Rooyen at the top did not play last week, one of the 26 as we're speaking who wasn't in the field. Very simply with him, he's been playing so well for a good year now. Remember, he won at Cabo last year, brand new course, similar setup, wide fairways, big greens, a little windier down there, but he got the job done. And then at Myrtle Beach, he finished tied for 4th. Again, a new course. Here's a guy who does all of the things very well, but he doesn't necessarily have to play fully exempt, but he wants to get into all of the events as well. And here he is gunning for that. So confidence is high. He's like 50-1 to win, something like that last time I checked it. But it's a nice gradual ascent from Keith Mitchell at like 16-1 up into the field. You could toss these guys up in the air and land on any of them, but the way I have them is where my confidence is stronger this week.
I'm a fellow gopher along with EVR, so I will not be complaining about Erik van Rooyen at the top of the power rankings. And just on the Mitchell point, if we're going to take it back to what you started with, talking about wide fairways of a resort course, Keith Mitchell, one of the best drivers of the golf ball, not necessarily one of the most accurate, but if the fairways are going to be wider, it can maybe, you don't want to be way offline because the black lava that lines some of these fairways, again, very, very cool visually. You don't want to be in there at all. Like, that's basically just a pick it up and take your drop. But there is an opportunity, if you're just a little bit wayward, that the generous fairways are going to let you get away with some of that. So I can see why Keith Mitchell, in that sense, his game very much fits it, where last week, I know we talked about him missing the cut, but I think you're right in that he could easily play well again this week.
Yeah, I talked about him missing the cut. I'm not going to put that on you. And I know my audience. I knew you were going to be hosting this week. That's why EVR was the top. I should just have said that and walked away.
Awesome. All right. So I want to talk about someone that's not in the power rankings, and that's the highest ranked player in this field right now. That's Chris Kirk. He's one of the top betting favorites, but he did not kind of crack your look at the 15. Is there any specific reason why Kirk may be out there? His status is mostly secure, so I wonder if that's part of it. But what points you to maybe Chris Kirk not having the week that at least the betting markets would suggest?
Yeah, so he's 28-1, plus 2,800 at BetMGM as we're speaking here on Tuesday afternoon. I could have easily figured out a way to throw him in there, but I wanted other players who come in with a little more sauce in matter of speaking, a little more of a sharper angle, who get me excited, like the three guys we just talked about get me excited this week, and others, of course. If I'm thinking about Kirk in a betting market, I would probably default into a top 20 at best. That's not an indictment by any means. Power rankings goes 15. If there was another 5, he probably would have been in the next 5. And he's not a sleeper. He's too strong to be a sleeper. Obviously, having won this year certainly almost disqualifies him in my old way of defining what a sleeper is. But I like the angle. Yeah, if you're thinking about reaching A top 10 for my purposes would be a reach. Top 20 would be a smarter play, even if he's even money.
14th on the power rankings, Daniel Berger. We saw signs of life from him last week at the Sanderson. He's popped up here and there throughout the season, but never really getting that top end result. I remember talking to him way back at the Amex when he was playing well through a couple of rounds, and it didn't last. That was, I think, his first start back. So it's been a long road coming back from that back injury. Last week, kind of said he feels 100% again. Putting him in the power rankings seems to be a vote of confidence that you feel like this is sustainable and it may not just be a 1 week blip.
Hope so. I mean, I think we've all believed it that before he did, which is odd. He's the guy. He's so talented. He's still in his prime. It's not like he's old by any means, and he's got this back. And if anybody, I've had my own issues with the back in recent years. Anybody who's ever had an issue with a back injury, I mean, forget about being a professional athlete. Just try, doing some light work around the house. It's not easy. It's debilitating, and I can understand how it can get into his head. We've talked about this with Swanee over the years about how a guy with a back, it takes much longer to get back there, pun intended, I suppose. But it took him a lot longer, especially for a guy of that age, and it's really concerning that he's finally admitted. Again, maybe it's because we haven't heard him talk much. He hasn't been in contention, and you know how it is in this business. If you're not contending, you're not really being sought after for a quote. So in betting, now we do it on a weekly basis, and there he is at 14 in the power rankings. I just wanted to hop aboard a guy who finally has said he's 100%, and he went out there and proved it last week with the top 10. For a guy of that talent, of that ilk, that's enough right now. Let's get back on the board.
All right, last guy I want to touch on. If you're listening to the podcast, you just heard our conversation with him. That's Patrick Fishburne. He's been on the power rankings in recent weeks. I think last week he was there. This week he's not. He's one of 9 Utahns. I don't even know. I asked him what it was. He didn't know if it's Utahns or Utes or whatever, but we'll go with Utahns. He's one of 9 in the field, has played this course just once or twice as a ambassador for Black Desert. So knows it just from that, whatever experience you can glean from playing in Utah, playing at slight elevation, not a ton of elevation. He's got to have that. He doesn't show up in the power rankings, but he does show up in your sleeper picks. What are you expecting or seeing from Patrick Fishburne entering this week that at least has him on your sleeper radar, if not the power rankings radar?
Yeah, Utahn. Utahn.
Utahn. All right.
Yeah, you got it. Utes works too. Utes obviously works for me and my son who graduated in May. That's the swag behind me, I should mention. Yeah, I think most people see the word Utahn in crosswords, at least those of us who do crosswords, because it's a nice fit of unusual letters together for 5 letters when you need them. He was my last of 5 top 5 picks who delivered a top 5, and that was at the Procore Championship. He's had 4 top 10s in his last several starts. He's been one of the hottest golfers of anybody on the PGA Tour. And I wrote in the sleepers this week I have him, by the way, for a top 10, as you and I are speaking. He was plus 275 at BetMGM. That's not long by any means relative to the others. He's like 5th or 6th shortest. But I needed to put him in there for the reasons you mentioned. He is one guy with a little bit of experience. I did not add that to the capsule because I try to play it conservatively. You can go play a course, but how well do you really know it? It really doesn't come in. I didn't write about Wyndham Clark knowing much about Cherry Hills when it was that week for the BMW Championship. He was not in my power rankings. I got panned for that. I'll probably get panned for Fishburne by the time this circles around enough. But I like the fact that all of those connective tissues are aligned, but he's still a rookie. And it's easy to go too far into it. Even though I had him for a top 5 at Procore, that was in the sleepers content. This is a top 10 for the Black Desert, not in the power rankings. Easily could have been part of that next 5 with Chris Kirk. Fishburne does a lot of the things we've talked about already very well, and his form is there. The local or statewide flavor certainly is in his favor as well. Pumping the brakes a little bit, just a little bit. Obviously, top 10 is the expectation. I just mentioned a minute ago, Chris Kirk expectation, it'll be top 20. So I like Fishburne even more. Go get him in that market for top 10 at plus 275.
Yeah, and he said he's now at 85th in the FedEx Cup fall standings. He said he feels pretty good about that standing, keeping his card for next year.
Yeah.
So now he's kind of shifted to hey, can I win one of these? Can I now chase the Aon next 10 to try to get into some of those signature events? So I think it's hard to know what exactly that'll do to a golfer when psychologically they've turned their brain into, hey, maybe I can be a little bit more aggressive. Hey, I'm trying to go win. But that seems to be his mindset. So take that for whatever it's worth, because that's seems to be where he is. He's freed up a little bit now. He's not worried about the day-to-day grind of just trying to keep his job for next year. He feels freed up, and maybe in a familiar place like his home, maybe that can come out and he can contend this week. So I do like that as a top 10. Any final words, Rob?
Yeah, I just want to toss in like Matt McCarty last week at Sanderson Farms made his PGA Tour membership debut. Same situation. He's in a terrific place. It doesn't have anything to lose, and he went out there and he made the cut. He probably do better this week now that he's got that first week under his belt. Max McGreevy in the field this week after finally getting his card. Well, finally getting his card back after a couple of years in the PGA Tour. He's finished number 2 in the KFT points list. He's in the field this week. Fishburne's in the same boat. Nothing to lose, everything to gain. Can chase the next goal, which would be a win. But to have done so well, and especially late in his rookie season with the pressure on to probably looking at the FedEx Cup points list right around the U.S. Open and wondering, man, I have some work to do. And now he is 4 months later, and he's got the work done, and he can go chase it. So yeah, a lot to love there. And the fact that they just got done playing so well, you'd expect them to continue to play well, not squander all of those great finishes and all the successes and celebrations they've had recently.
All right, Rob, I'm excited to watch the Black Desert Classic. Only more excited after chatting with you. That's how it goes every week. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Talk to you again next time.